I used to think peace was something you could buy. Pick the right house, the right neighborhood, put up a tall enough fence, and the world would leave you alone. But I was wrong. The first morning I stepped out back, still half asleep, I saw them. 2 wet footprints leading away from our pool. Too big to be mine, too wide to be Jason's, and definitely not ours. Nothing was broken, nothing was stolen, but someone had been there, watching. Later I found a hole, a perfectly round, smooth little hole, just the size of a bottle cap, drilled into our wooden fence. That's when I looked up and saw her, Karen, standing on her porch, pruning roses like it was any other day. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, she just watched. They call it community harmony, but harmony, I've learned, is often just a polite word for control. This is the story of how my safe place, our dream home, became a stage, because when your neighbor decides you don't deserve privacy, it's not just creepy, it's war. I never thought we'd find it. Not just a house, but a retreat, a place where the noise would finally stop, where I wouldn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder every time I took a breath. Jason and I had been searching for 2 years. 2 long years of driving past perfectly fine houses that just didn't feel right. But this one hit different. It was raining the day we found it, that kind of soft Georgia rain that hushes the world like a lullaby. I remember standing barefoot in the backyard, watching little ripples dance across the pool. The whole space just whispered, "You're safe here." I turned to Jason and nodded once. That was it. No big debate, no pros and cons list. We signed the papers that week. And when we moved in, it felt like we could finally breathe again. The house was modern but modest. Big windows, open layout, no clutter, just space. Jason had just left his full-time hospital job. I was still healing from something I never fully talk about. It was quiet, predictable, for the first time in years. It felt like we were allowed to be boring. We'd wake up, play classical music, sip coffee in the kitchen as sunlight spilled across the tile. I'd float in the pool. Jason would read or work on diagnostics from his laptop. There were no loud neighbors, no dogs barking at midnight, just calm. But here's the thing about calm. Sometimes it's just silence waiting to be broken, and spoiler alert, ours didn't break with a bang. It started with something a lot quieter, a smile that came too late, a gate that creaked too softly, a pair of eyes watching from just 2 doors down. But hey, before things get creepy, let me ask you something. Have you ever had that feeling someone was watching you, even when everything looked perfectly normal? If this hits home already, go ahead and drop a comment. And if you haven't yet, hit that like button and subscribe. Because trust me, it's about to get real. Now, let's rewind just a little. Because before the footprints, before the hole in the fence, before the letters and the mirror and the dead bird, there was Karen. And the first time I saw her, I didn't realize she was about to turn our dream into a full-blown surveillance nightmare. It started like any other evening, the kind where the air cools just enough to make you forget it's still technically winter in Georgia. I had just finished my usual floating session, arms out, face up, eyes closed, the world on mute. It had become my thing. Not swimming, just floating, still, quiet, free. But that night, something felt different. I climbed out of the pool, wrapped a towel around my shoulders, and headed toward the deck, and that's when I saw them. 2 wet footprints. Not mine, not Jason's, and not small. They were larger than either of our feet, spaced wide apart, like someone had taken confident strides across the deck. But we live in a fenced backyard, with a lock, with no one else in or out, so who the hell left them? For a second, my brain tried to make up stories to protect me. Maybe it was condensation, maybe some weird bird with size 11 sneakers dropped by to say hi. I mean, denial is comfy, until it isn't. I didn't tell Jason that night. I couldn't. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust myself. The last time I'd brought up a fear like that, I saw the hesitation in people's eyes. The, "Are you sure you're not just anxious" look? And honestly, after what I went through years ago, sometimes even I wasn't sure anymore. So instead I dried off, poured a glass of water, and tried to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But the next morning I woke up early and did something I hadn't done since we moved in. I checked the fence. Every inch. Every board. And that's when I found it. Tucked behind a patch of ivy near the back corner, hidden like a secret. It was small, smooth, circular. A hole. No bigger than a bottle cap. But from the inside, it was sanded clean. Someone had drilled it deliberately, not broken, not splintered, just precise. I crouched, peered through. Sunlight shot through it like a laser pointer. And beyond the fence, I saw lattice. I saw vines, and I knew exactly which house it pointed to. I walked back inside without a word, sat down and stared at the glass of water I'd poured. My hands were shaking. Jason came home later that evening, kissed my shoulder, and asked what was for dinner. I just looked at him and said, "We need to check the fence together tomorrow." That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared, but because someone had looked into our life without permission. And the silence in the backyard? It wasn't peace anymore. It was something waiting. If you've ever had that moment where you knew something was wrong but couldn't prove it yet, tell me about it in the comments. Sometimes trusting your gut is all you have, and in our case, it was the only thing that saved us. Coming up next, Jason sees it too, and when he does, he doesn't laugh. He doesn't doubt me, he looks at the hole, then back at me and says, "We're not imagining this. Someone's been watching us. Let's talk about what happened next." Jason didn't say anything at first. He just ran his fingers over the edge of the hole, slow and deliberate like he was reading Braille. Then he turned to me and said exactly what I'd been afraid to admit out loud. "We're not imagining this. Someone's been watching us." That sentence didn't scare me. It validated me, and that, honestly, made me want to cry a little. We stood there for a while, both staring through that tiny circle like it was a peephole into a bad dream. On the other side, we could just make out the neighbor's trellis, partially covered in vines. Karen's yard, of course. Jason went back inside and returned with a flashlight. He crouched down and shone the light through the hole. It passed clean through, illuminating the exact corner of the yard where Karen's lattice stood. There was no guesswork. No "maybe it's the wind" excuse. This was a sight line, a deliberate, carefully placed viewing hole. He pulled back and looked at me with this steady, focused expression. Not panic, not rage. Just certainty. That quiet kind of anger that doesn't explode. It builds. We took pictures, measured the angle, marked the exact location, and that night Susan too was born. The version of me that no longer second-guessed her instincts, the one who didn't wait to be proven right to take action. I wrote an email to the HOA. Short, respectful, attached the photo, asked politely if they could investigate the boundary on the other side of the fence. And then we waited. The response came fast. Not in an email, no. That would have been too modern, too traceable. It came in a pale ivory envelope, slid into our mailbox like an invitation to a tea party with passive aggression on the menu. It was from Karen. Typed, formal, thanking us for bringing a matter of structural concern to her attention. And then it ended with this little gem. Harmony within the community is best preserved through discretion and dialogue, rather than assumption and escalation. I read that line 3 times. Jason read it out loud, then folded the letter and tucked it into the drawer next to the kitchen sink like it was a live grenade. That was not a denial. It was a warning. Soft-spoken, sugar-coated, but a warning nonetheless. And suddenly, this wasn't just about a hole in our fence. It was about control, territory, power. That night I sat outside in the dark, not to enjoy the stars, but to listen. Every creak of wood, every shift in the wind felt like a whisper I couldn't quite understand, and just before dawn, I saw it. A shadow, moving behind the curtain gap, human, deliberate. It didn't run. It just glided out of view. I told myself it was a trick of the light, but I knew better. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done in that moment? Would you confront your neighbor, set up cameras, or pack a bag and run? Because the next day we made a choice. We weren't backing down. And that's when we found the scuff marks by the side gate, the grass pressed down, the ladder, the next level of this twisted little game. But more on that in the next chapter. The day after the shadow, I went to check the side gate. I don't know what I expected, maybe nothing. But what I found? 3 faint scuff marks, lined up perfectly against the siding, right below the roofline, like someone had leaned a ladder, climbed, watched, and beneath them, a shallow dent in the grass, still fresh, still pressed like a footprint left in soft memory foam. I called Jason over. He didn't say a word, just stared at the marks with this clenched jaw look I'd seen before, the same look he gave our insurance company when they tried to say our cracked windshield didn't qualify under comprehensive. That night, we tested the motion lights. Still working, still armed, but no alerts. Whoever was doing this, they were smart. They knew how to move without being seen, at least not by the cameras we had at the time. So we did the only thing we could think of. We upgraded. Called a contractor friend, had the entire perimeter checked for weak points. He didn't find anything new, but he suggested motion sensors, more cameras, new angles. We agreed. Jason was already on Amazon ordering a small surveillance system that could rival a bank vault. And I was busy checking our mail, and that's when I found it. Letter number 2. This one wasn't typed, no HOA logo, just plain white paper, no stamp, slipped neatly under our doormat like a secret handshake. Inside were 8 handwritten words. Please remember this place is meant to be modest. No name, no signature. But the penmanship? Immaculate, neat, strong downward strokes, and that same curly little lowercase r I'd seen before. Jason read it, his fingers curled tighter around the paper as he passed it to me. The message was clear. We see you, we judge you, and now we're telling you how to behave in your own backyard. We took it to the local precinct. The officer we spoke to was polite, but his hands were tied. Creepy, sure, he said, but not a crime. Unless there was a threat or physical trespass, there wasn't much they could do. Still, he suggested a visible camera, even a dummy one, as a deterrent. Deterrent, as if the person behind this was just going to turn around and go home because they saw a little red light blinking. That night, Jason sat outside under the pergola, flashlight in one hand, eyes scanning every shadow. And me? I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that second letter. I realized something. This wasn't about privacy anymore. It was about power. Karen, because yes, by now we knew it was Karen. She didn't just want to observe. She wanted to own the narrative. Decide what was modest, what was right, and punish us if we didn't play along. And the next morning, she made it official. A new flyer appeared on the neighborhood bulletin board, anonymous, titled Common Standards and Respectful Living. It talked about visual uniformity and avoiding disruptive displays and considering your neighbor's perspectives. The message was clear as day. It wasn't about lawn gnomes or garden flags. It was about us and our cameras and our pool and our existence being a disruption. I tore it down without reading the last line. And just like that, this had stopped being passive. It was now aggressively polite warfare. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who hides behind rules just to bully others. And hey, hit like if you think modesty doesn't mean surveillance from the shrubbery, because next, it wasn't a letter. It wasn't a flyer. It was a face, a figure, behind the trellis, close, still, watching. And that's when it stopped being a game. We thought cameras would fix it. I mean, that's what normal people do, right? You feel unsafe, you install cameras. You don't confront your neighbor with a flamethrower and a megaphone yelling, "I know what you did." No, you document, you defend, and so we did. Jason ordered a security system that could basically track a mosquito in 4K. We mounted 4 cameras, one at each corner of the house. Wide angles, night vision, motion alerts, cloud backup. We even added a 5th cam under the pergola, aimed directly at the back gate, just in case Miss Majesty decided to drop in again. The setup took all day. Jason was meticulous. Drilling, wiring, testing. You'd think he was building a space probe. That night, we sat on the patio like proud homeowners on a home improvement show, sipping wine, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops, just waiting for the motion alert to go ping. And sure enough, it did. 2:13 a.m. p.m. Jason sat up like a meerkat with a tablet, swiped open the camera feed, and there it was. Not a full person, not a clear face, just a faint blur, moving behind the trellis, lingering for 4 seconds, then vanishing. But here's the thing. That blur, it wasn't nothing. It was movement in a space no one should be standing in at 2 in the morning. We saved the clip, backed it up in 3 places, then sent it straight to Lauren, our attorney. Her response: 3 words, "Now we escalate." And just when we thought that might be the turning point, Karen showed up, at our door, in daylight, wearing pearls, pressed slacks, and a pastel blouse like she just stepped out of a Southern Living photo shoot titled "Gaslight Me Softly." She knocked 3 times, sharp and evenly spaced like Morse code. Jason opened the door cautiously, expecting maybe a package, maybe a HOA notice. But nope, there she was, clipboard in one hand, ceramic travel mug in the other. "Good morning," she smiled. "I just wanted to stop by and mention a few residents have expressed concerns about the recent changes to your property." Jason blinked. "Changes?" "The cameras," she said with a little head tilt. "They're making people feel observed, watched. It's unsettling." I nearly choked on my own thoughts. "Unsettling? You've been peering through drilled holes and hiding cameras in vines, Karen." But I stayed silent, arms crossed, watching. "Jason?" He stayed cool. "We installed them after someone watched us through our fence." Her smile tightened just a bit. "I understand that's your perspective, but not everyone appreciates being surveilled. It creates a climate of suspicion." I could have laughed if I wasn't already vibrating with rage. Then she added this gem: "We just ask that you be respectful of shared spaces, perhaps lower your camera angles. It disrupts the neighborhood's aesthetic." Jason looked at her like someone trying to decide if they were speaking to a human or a villain on trial. "Are you speaking on behalf of yourself or someone else?" "I'm speaking on behalf of community harmony," she said. "That's my job." Then she turned, walked away. Her heels clicked like little exclamation points on the concrete. We didn't say a word, just closed the door behind her, and later that night, another letter appeared. No envelope, no name, just 8 terrifying words. "Modesty is not optional. Your behavior is not invisible." We brought that letter straight to the police. This time they took it a little more seriously. Still no charges, still no arrest. But now there was a paper trail. Have you ever dealt with someone who made you look like the problem while they caused all the chaos? Tell me in the comments. Let it out. We've been there. And if you're still watching, tap that like button to help this story reach people who need to hear it. Because next, we froze the footage and zoomed in on a hand, a ring, Karen's ring. Jason paused the footage, backed it up, played it again in slow motion. It was 4:06 a.m. The camera by the back gate had triggered. We watched, breath held, as a figure in a light robe or coat stepped into view, paused near the trellis, and then, like some kind of twisted ritual, gently pressed a hand to the slats of our fence. Not violently, not hurried, just calmly, like she belonged there. And that's when we saw it. Her hand, clear as day, pale, thin fingers, and on the ring finger, a large, silver, oval-shaped ring with a dark stone in the middle. Jason didn't even need to ask. He already knew what I was about to say. "That's her," I whispered. "That's Karen's ring. I've seen it every time she waves." Boom! There it was. Not suspicion, not paranoia. Proof. Not court-ready maybe, but enough. We sent the footage straight to Lauren, our attorney, and bless that woman. She didn't waste a minute. She drafted a formal cease and desist letter tailored with all the evidence we'd collected. It was delivered by courier, hand to door. 3 days later we got a response. 10 pages. Typed, watermarked, signed in delicate swirling blue ink. Karen's reply wasn't just a denial, it was a counter-accusation. She accused us of defamation, said our continued speculation could be interpreted as harassment, said the community board had been copied, and hinted that legal action might follow if we persisted in our slander. Jason read every page aloud, and then fed each sheet, one by one, into the shredder. But that night, as we were winding down, the camera under the pergola triggered again. We rushed to the monitor. The clip showed something new, a rustle near the fence line, then a faint metallic click. The image jolted slightly. Someone had touched the lens. Not broken it, just tilted it about 20 degrees off center. Jason flew outside, flashlight in hand. Barefoot, silent, focused. Nothing. No one. No footprints. But the camera had been touched. This wasn't just creepy anymore. This was methodical, technical, intentional, and it told us one thing. Karen wasn't scared. She wasn't hiding. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the house felt like it was holding its breath. Every creak in the walls felt like someone tiptoeing behind it. I started keeping a log. Every incident, every note, every click, creak, blur, and chill. Call it paranoia? I called it documentation. If you've ever been gaslit by someone who insists you're the one overreacting, only to prove them wrong later, drop a comment. This story, it's not just for us. It's for anyone who's ever been told, just let it go. Because what we found next, it wasn't a letter. It wasn't a blurry clip. It was a mirror, hidden in our vines, pointed directly at our pool. So, let's talk about the mirror. It was a tiny, convex circle, no bigger than a quarter, tucked deep into the vines near our privacy trellis. I found it while watering the plants. At first I thought it was just a reflection from the morning dew, but no, this thing was mounted, angled, deliberately aimed to reflect a wide view of our backyard. I didn't scream, didn't cry, I just stood there and stared at it like it had personally insulted my mother. Jason came out, saw me crouched there, and when I showed him the mirror, he didn't say a word. He just turned around, walked back inside, and came back out with gloves and tweezers. We collected it like evidence, because that's what it was. A few hours later, we sat in Lauren's office with everything laid out on her desk. Photos, footage, the ring, the notes, the mirror. She flipped through it all calmly like she was reading a very polite horror novel. Then she looked up and said, "We need to take this to the board. Not because they'll help, but because it forces them to pick a side." And so we did. The HOA hearing was held in a community center room that smelled like stale coffee and overused plastic chairs. Jason wore a blazer. I wore a calm expression that was 3 blinks away from a full meltdown. Karen, she arrived early. Pressed cream blazer, thin silver necklace, clipboard in hand like she was chairing the damn thing. She didn't even look at us. Just crossed her legs and sat in the front row like this was her courtroom. The board opened the meeting with talk of community standards and visual uniformity, the usual HOA poetry. They referenced photos, blurry ones, taken from angles that could only be explained by trespass or telescopic lenses. They weren't official HOA photos. They were Karen's. Lauren stood up, calm, cool, and proceeded to dismantle every false claim with timestamps, citations, and the precision of a woman who does not lose. She never once said Karen's name. She didn't have to. The entire room knew who we were talking about. She handed out printouts of police reports, a list of resident statements, and photos of our cameras being tampered with. The board listened, nodded, pretended to care. No decision was made that night. Of course not. Why take a stand when you can just table the matter for review, right? Karen didn't flinch, but I saw it. A subtle twitch in her jaw when one board member used the phrase, "a concerning pattern of behavior." 2 days later, we got their official response. No action would be taken. No formal acknowledgement of Karen's behavior. They cited sufficient evidence and desire to remain neutral. Neutral. As if neutrality exists when one side is being watched through holes in mirrors and the other side is trimming roses and pearls. That was the moment we realized we were on our own, no more counting on the system to protect us. And that very same afternoon, I found our mailbox dented inward, smashed right at the top, like someone had come by with a hammer and just suggested something. The camera? Of course. Jason had adjusted its angle to appease the HOA. So yeah, no footage. Just a bent box. And a very clear message. You think this is over? It's not even close. If you've ever trusted an authority to protect you and ended up feeling like you just handed your safety over to a vending machine full of indifference, hit that like button. Or better yet, drop a comment. Tell me what happened. You're not alone. Because next, the silence gets deeper. Not safer, just quieter. And then we find the dead bird. At some point, silence stops being peaceful. It starts feeling like someone holding their breath, waiting to pounce. After the HOA's neutral non-response in the mailbox incident, the air around our home changed. Stillness settled in. Too still, like the quiet before a storm, or before a scream. 2 days passed. Jason and I barely spoke about the case, not because we didn't care, because we already knew. We were being hunted with etiquette, stalked, politely. And then came Tuesday morning. Jason stepped outside like he always did, to grab the paper, pretend we still lived in a normal world. But this time he froze, bent down. When he came back inside, he didn't speak right away, just held up his phone. A photo, a dead bird, right under our front step, neck twisted, still damp like it had just fallen, or worse, been placed. But that's not what made me sit down. It was the thin piece of twine looped around its tiny legs. Not tight, not knotted, just tied. Intentionally, Jason told me he disposed of the body, washed his hands 3 times, then paced the house in silence like a man trying to memorize every square foot of a battlefield. When he finally showed me the photo, I didn't cry, I didn't gasp. I just stared at it and said, "She's not afraid of being seen anymore." Because she wasn't. This wasn't some subtle warning. This was theatrical, ritualistic, a message meant to gut-punch the psyche. You are fragile. You are being watched. You can be reached. That afternoon, Lauren called with an update. The board had officially declined to reprimand Karen or acknowledge any pattern of harassment. Apparently, our evidence was still inconclusive, because nothing says justice like ignoring 12 incidents and a bird corpse. Lauren didn't sugarcoat it. "You're alone in this now," she said. "The board won't help. If she's going to be stopped, it'll be by real law enforcement, not a neighborhood meeting. Fine, we could work with that." But that night, I couldn't sleep. At 2:00 a.m., I found myself wandering the house barefoot, checking locks, glancing at camera feeds, listening for something. And then I stepped onto the back deck. The air was still, too still. I wrapped my arms around myself and walked toward the fence. That's when I saw it, just a flash. A black rectangle half hidden behind the planter, with a tiny blinking light. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding. It was a camera. Not ours. I picked it up with shaking hands, brought it inside, set it on the table, and just stared. Jason found me minutes later. When he asked what it was, I didn't speak. I didn't have to. I just turned it toward him. We packed it in a padded envelope, drove across town to one of Jason's tech consultant friends. The results came back that evening. "There are hours of footage," he said, "of your backyard, close range, night and day, and one of the files has audio." He paused. "She left you a message. We played it together in the living room." Karen's voice, calm, controlled, chilling. "You flaunt your bodies, you swim without shame, you flaunt your safety, but it's not yours to flaunt. Privacy is not a wall, it's a privilege, and I see through you." That was it. No yelling, no threat. Just a sermon from someone who thought she was right. Not just justified, but chosen. I walked into the bathroom and threw up, rinsed my mouth, stared at myself in the mirror for a long, long time. Then I came out, looked Jason in the eyes and said, "We're leaving now." We packed, left the house, checked into a hotel near the city, and the very next day, Karen broke in. If this story's got you shouting at your screen like, "Why aren't they arresting her?" I feel you, trust me. Drop a comment. And hit like if you've ever dealt with someone who truly believed they were the hero in your downfall, because next, we come back to find something hanging under our pergola. And it's not wind chimes. We weren't home when it happened, police were. Lauren had submitted everything, audio recording, video footage, the dead bird, the mirror, the letters, and it was finally enough. They issued a temporary restraining order, sent officers to our house to begin a formal search and collect potential evidence. And what they found? It was sick. Under the pergola, where Jason and I used to drink wine and talk about growing tomatoes someday, someone had hung a circle of makeshift wind chimes. Not store-bought, not cute. These were made of soda can strips, old utensils, and bits of reflective metal, sharpened, jagged, hanging from dental floss. And in the center of the circle, a laminated photo. Of me. Floating in the pool, arms out, eyes closed. Taken from our own camera footage. And on the back of the photo, written in black marker, "I watched you, and you looked back." I'll be honest with you, I felt my stomach turn when I saw the picture, not because I looked bad. Okay, maybe a little, but because that image, that moment, had once been mine, private, peaceful, sacred, and now it was someone else's trophy. That's when the police got serious. They searched Karen's house, attic, closets, drawers, and there, behind some boxes of holiday linens and vintage magazines, they found the journal. It wasn't hidden like she was ashamed of it. It was stored like it was important, like scripture. Pages and pages of observations, sketches, notes about our habits, when we swam, what we wore, when we laughed. She didn't call us Susan and Jason. She called me the Sun Woman, and Jason, the Sentinel. She wrote about us like we were characters in a play she was directing. She believed she had been placed in our lives to preserve moral structure, to watch, to correct, to intervene. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't even jealousy. It was obsession, dressed as divine purpose. Karen was arrested that night. Charges? Trespassing, unlawful surveillance, harassment, possession of illicit recordings, criminal threats. She didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't say a single word. But as they walked her past our house, she paused, looked up at the master bedroom window, and smiled. Not a big toothy grin, just a quiet, knowing smirk, like she'd finished something. 3 weeks passed before we returned home. The house looked untouched, but it felt different, hollowed, shifted, bruised. We walked through every room, checked every window, stood silently by the trellis where the hole had once been. Jason didn't ask how I felt. He already knew, because it wasn't grief I carried. It was something colder, quieter, a lack of trust, not in him, not in people, but in space. That night we sat on the back deck, no wine, no music, just presence. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered to no one in particular. She really thought she was doing the right thing. And that's what terrified me most. If you've ever had someone twist morality into a weapon, you know how deep that damage goes. Drop a comment, share your story, and if this series is resonating with you, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know, because next we rebuild not just fences or furniture, but the pieces of ourselves Karen tried to take. We didn't come home expecting closure. Closure is a myth. You don't get over being watched in your own backyard. You don't move on from knowing someone studied your life like a lab experiment. But we did come home ready to rebuild. The police had finished their investigation. Karen was in custody awaiting trial. The restraining order was permanent, and her journal, the mirror, the footage, the wind chimes, were all now exhibits. But our house? Our house still had scars. Not on the walls, not on the furniture, on us. The first week back, we didn't go near the pool. Didn't cook outside. Didn't open the curtains at night. We slept, but only lightly. Talked, but only in pieces. Jason went back to work. I returned to the records office twice a week, trying to feel normal again. But healing is weird. It doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in little victories, like sleeping through the night, or not flinching at a knock on the door, or laughing, really laughing for the first time in weeks over something stupid like Jason forgetting how the oven works. It wasn't until mid-April when I stood by the fence and told Jason, "I don't want to repair it. I want it gone. I want a new one. Solid. Seamless. No lattice. Just ours." He didn't hesitate, not even for a second. "Let's do it." And a week later, the old fence came down. Every board, every memory, every blind spot. The new one went up taller, stronger, smoother. No peepholes, no vines, no shared edges. And every time I looked out the window and saw it, I felt a little more like myself again. Some neighbors were kind, some weren't. A few dropped off flowers. One older couple left a note. "You didn't deserve any of it. We kept the plan." Said nothing. We weren't looking for apologies, just space. Jason rebuilt the deck with his own hands. I bought new patio furniture, not flashy, but clean, simple, safe. And then one night I stood barefoot by the pool, just watching it ripple in the evening breeze. Jason stepped out behind me. You ready? I didn't answer. I just dipped my toes in, lowered myself gently, not to swim, not to float, just to be. Eyes closed, arms open, breathing steady. And in that moment, I wasn't being watched. I wasn't performing. I wasn't reclaiming anything. I was simply alive. Not everything had been taken from us. Peace can't always be recovered, but it can be rebuilt. One boundary, one breath, one choice at a time. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you or reminded you that survival isn't weakness, it's courage, leave a comment, hit like, subscribe, and remember, your safety, your peace, your boundaries are not negotiable, because the world is full of people who will try to invade your stillness. But the most powerful thing you can ever do, protect it anyway.